we're going to be doing a review of Revelation chapter 1 through 16. So that's what we always do this, just to kind of keep people warmed up to what's going on in the book of Revelation and kind of touch on some things that, maybe you missed a couple chapters. Maybe I'll say something that you missed last time, or maybe I'll say something and it'll spark a thought in your mind. What's up, Christina? And so who knows, but it's fun. And I think repetition is very, very helpful. But let's go ahead and get on into the recap of Revelation. Actually, before we do that, I want you guys to understand the most important thing is always going to be the most important thing. And that is always going to be, how do you get to heaven? This is always going to be the thing. This is what we need to focus on more than anything else. Thank you, Christina. And the question is, how do you get to heaven? Well, the first thing you need to understand is that you are a sinner. We understand from Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so when you recognize that, then all of a sudden you're just like, man, and then you just realize that you need saving. In order to be saved, you first need to realize that you need saving. And so that's what's really important about the book of Romans, because that's where you can be walked down this Romans road. And the first step is understanding that you need to be saved. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. And so that's amazing. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. How amazing. It is not through Jesus Christ our Lord, and it is through Jesus Christ our Lord. And so that's why Paul expounds on that a little bit more. He says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And so the main thing is always going to be the main thing, and that is the gospel that you can find in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3 and 4, where it talks about how Jesus died according to the scriptures. He was buried, and he rose again on the third day according to the scriptures. It's absolutely wonderful to just talk about that. I mean, how loving, how awesome that an all-powerful, almighty God dove in after his creation to come in after you, to come in after me, he came in and he's like, I'm going in after him. And so that's what he did. And so it's really kind of amazing just to marinate in that thought. It's something that we are so undeserving, but what a beautiful picture. And so that is the primary issue. And so that's what I want you to always remember. That's the focus. Everything that we're going to be talking about here in the book of Revelation is going to be secondary. And so I want you to remember, as we go through about these studies, I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm not saying this is how it is, and if you disagree with me, then you're dumb and all this kind of stuff. I can't wait to get to heaven to find out how wrong I've been. Thank you, lovely Laura. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you so much. That is very awesome. Thank you guys. Man, that is super neat. Thank you so much. And so I just often think that I can't wait I can't wait because I'm just going to be like, I can't wait to get to heaven to be like, I told 1,000 people that this is how it was. And you're telling me that this is how it was. That's how it's going to be. My pleasure. Yes. Thank you so much. That's super kind. And so it's just really fun, just trying to get in there, because when you remember and you allow yourself to be incorrect on some of these secondary issues, then you're naturally going to fall down on what we should be focusing on to begin with. Hey, thank you, Britta. Thank you so much for that gift. The thing that we should be focusing on is love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Boom. And then when you do that, then you're going to love your neighbor as yourself. And then you're going to be reflecting Christ in that kind of action. And then, we're supposed to grow in other areas as well, but those are the things that we need to be focusing on. And so if you allow yourself to be wrong, or if you allow yourself to lose some arguments so that you can win some souls, then that's just going to further the kingdom. And that's what we're supposed to be trying to do here in some kind of way, form or other. I also wanted to touch on real fast, because it was brought to my attention. I often say all the time, I'm like, we need to get out there and tell people about Jesus. But I also want you to understand that there are other ways. And I feel like maybe, hopefully you didn't take it the wrong way. The only thing is not just going out and telling people about Jesus. I don't want you to think that, hey, thanks, Isaiah. Thanks, man. Good to see you, man. There's a million other things that you can be doing to glorify God, but raising your children, there's people who might not be able to get outside. And so the question is, well, how do I go tell somebody about Jesus? Well, it's not just, it's not just going out and telling people about Jesus. It's praying for somebody. It's writing somebody a letter. It's like going to church and trying to encourage somebody else, or, hey, if somebody comes over to visit you, then you can encourage them. It's doing something here online, sending somebody an email, praying, 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 praying. It's really interesting because it's not a matter of how much you're doing. It's a matter of your heart. And I want you to remember that. And so I'm sorry if I ever came across as saying, this is what we need to be doing. And because that's just a piece of the puzzle. Of course we need to be doing that, but it's all the other things as well. It's all the other things. It's all of it. We need to be doing all of those things so that we can glorify God. And so hopefully that makes sense to you guys. But, and it's also important to recognize that everybody's been given different amounts in a roundabout way. You and I, I might have been given 3 talents and you might have been given 5, or I might have been given 5 talents and you might have been given 3. It doesn't matter. And so we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to one another, I think, because if we do that, then we start to look at each other instead of thinking about what I'm just doing for the Lord, and then our motives might change. So I just want you to remember, the heart of the matter is always the matter of the heart. And so whatever you're doing, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do all for the glory of God. And so if you remember that, then you will do well. And so that is a really, really good thing. Absolutely. Heart posture, Ashley, 100%. All right. So with that being said, amen. Right, Julie and Bridget? Yeah, that's absolutely super cool. What's up, Kimberly? How you doing? Good to see you. All right. So let's dive on into this recap of Revelation chapter 1. So it's always important to remember who the author is. And the author is a guy named John. What's up, Trixie? Hello, Melissa. The guy is a guy named John. And so John wrote the book of Revelation. He is on the island of Patmos. Thank you, Bridget. Oh, man, you guys are super cool. That's so kind. Thank you so much. He's on the island of Patmos, and he has this revelation. And so I want you to remember that. Hello, Sandy. What's up? What's up, Trevin? Good to see you, brother. So he has this revelation. And so thank you, Sandy. My goodness, guys. Thank you, guys. He has this revelation. I want you to remember it is singular. And I want you to remember it is not revelations. It is revelation. The book of Revelation is about the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's about the unveiling of Jesus Christ. It is all this book, even though we get a whole bunch of gory details and whatnot, the focus is revealing Jesus Christ. Thank you, Trevin. Thank you, guys. It's about revealing Jesus. And we read about that in Revelation chapter 19. We read about the unveiling of Jesus. And I'm like, my goodness, that is super neat. What's up, Toby? Hello. Thanks for sharing the live there. But it's really kind of cool to see what's going on here. But in Revelation chapter 1, there's a couple things that stand out. The first thing is to understand that there is a blessing attached to this book. And how amazing. I mean, we get blessed just by reading this book. What does that mean? I don't know. I can't say definitively, but I can let you know that I've been blessed by understanding and studying this book because I understand it. And so I am blessed by that. That's a blessing. It's really interesting. When we start thinking about rewards and stuff like that, we always think of futuristic awards, but how about the in the moment rewards? How our mind can be at complete peace, because that's a blessing right there. If you have peace, that is a blessing. And so when you think about blessing, we think about futuristic or what's it going to be or what kind of presents am I going to be given and all this kind of stuff. I want you to think that it could be something a little bit more current, or something that could be happening at the moment if you dive into this book and you get it all over you. But the book of Revelation chapter 1, Jesus appears to John and he tells him to write a letter to 7 churches. And so those 7 churches are Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Those are the 7 churches that John was told to write a letter to. So these 7 churches get 7 letters. But Revelation chapter 1, verse 19 is your key verse for the book of Revelation. The reason why it's your key verse is because in Revelation chapter 1, verse 19, you are given the outline for the entire book of Revelation. Jesus tells John to write the things which he has seen, the things that are, and the things that will take place after this. These are 3 things that you can make an outline for. Thank you, Ashley. These are 3 things where you can make an outline for. If you were writing or making an outline for your class or something like that, and you had to type it up, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to separate everything in this category, and then I'm going to separate it all in this category, and then I'm going to separate it all in 3 categories. And that's basically what's going on. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for those gifts. And so the first thing is he was told to write the things which are. So the question is, what are the things that are? Well, the things that are in is what he sees in Revelation chapter 1. What did he see in Revelation chapter 1? He saw Jesus. And how did he see Jesus? He saw Jesus in the role of a priest. He saw Jesus in his priestly garb. And so he sees Jesus. He sees all of Jesus's titles are in Revelation chapter 1. And so that's really kind of cool to see. But that's what he has, or the things which are. So that's chapter 1. But then when you dive into Revelation chapter 2 and 3, he changes from writing the things that are to writing to the things that that he has seen to the things that are. I'm sorry, I mixed those up. So Revelation chapter 1 are the things that he has seen. Revelation chapter 2 and 3 are the things that are, because the church age was currently going on during John's life. John was living, he's a part of the church. And so that's really fascinating. But in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, he's writing to 7 different churches. And so now this is Jesus writing, but John is the one who is actually literally writing it down. And so if you look at like the theme of every one of these letters, Jesus always starts off by identifying himself. He always identifies himself a different way. And he pretty much gives every church a good thing, and then he always gives the churches a bad thing. But that's not the case for all of them. There's a church that doesn't have anything bad said against it, and there's a church that doesn't have anything good said against it. And so the church that doesn't have anything bad said against it there's actually 2 of them, Smyrna and Philadelphia. But on the flip side of that, the church that has nothing good said against it or about it is Laodicea. In Laodicea, which is the last church age, it has nothing good said against it or about it. There's nothing good said about Laodicea, which is very provocative. But anyways, you have these 7 letters written to 7 different churches, and Jesus is addressing issues inside the church. It's inside the church. And so what I would like for you to think about is that if Jesus was going to write a letter to the church that you go to, I wonder, like, what would you think he would write down? Because here you get a little model of what he wrote about those churches back then. And so if you go to a church that's like, like some Baptist church or whatever, whatever church you go to, if you got a letter in the mail, you go out there and you open it up and you're like, oh, hey, this is from Jesus. And you're like, oh, this is what he's talking about, our church. It's really interesting. But then I want you to go a little bit deeper. And what I mean by that is I'm like, you as your body, if you're a born again believer, I wonder what he would say about your body, your church, because I am representing that, right? And so it's really fascinating being like, man, which church do I fall in line as far as these 7 churches here in Revelation chapter 2 and 3? What about the church that I physically go to? What about that church? What would they say about that church? Which one is the church that I go to? And so it's so interesting to see like who you would like, because, if you do a self-assessment, then you'll place yourself in one of these 7 churches. Which one do you belong to? And which one does your actual church belong to, does it seem? It's just something to consider. Anyways, Revelation chapter 2, you have the church written to Ephesus. That church had, Jesus gave him a big pat on the back saying, you're doing such a great job. But then he's like, I have this against you, and it's that they forgot their first love. What that means is that they were so worried about doctrinal issues that they forgot to love. And so would you rather have somebody like all gung-ho about like, this is how it is and this is how it is? Or would you have somebody rather loving on you and just being like, I don't know much. I'm sorry that I don't know much, but I love the Lord and I know that I love him and he loves me. And like, can I just tell you how much I just a little bit that I know. And so he's like, I'd rather have. And so it's really interesting. So he's like, you're seeing like, he's trying to, I want you to remember, while we are down here on earth in this tent, in this body that we currently have right now, we are currently going through a sanctification process. If you are a born again believer, you are being sanctified. It's the 3 tenses of salvation, right? Justification, sanctification, glorification. When you got born again, which was yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whenever you were born again, that was a one and done situation. That happened once, and that's only ever going to happen once. As you go about your Christian walk, every single day, minute by minute, second by second, you are being sanctified. And so that's like the silver, the silversmith stirring the silver as it's heated up from the bottom and all the impurities start coming up. He's working on you and you're getting worked on and you're just like, oh my goodness. And you're like, oh, I messed up. And he's like, yep, you messed up. And so he's like trying to get this stuff out of your life so that you can reflect him more. And so that's what we want to be doing. Hey, thank you, Winnie and Yvonne. Thank you so much for those gifts. And so when we get home, we will be glorified. But right now we are in this sanctification process and sometimes it is tough. So when you go on to continue on in Revelation chapter 2, the next church is a church in Smyrna. This church was absolutely crushed. When you think of Smyrna, I want you to think of myrrh. Myrrh. Whenever you think of myrrh, you should naturally think of death. Because when you go back to Matthew chapter 2, you have these wise men. They show up to King Herod and they're like, hey, king, where's the one who was born king of the Jews? And so they end up finding Jesus, who was about 2 years old at the time, and they bowed down to him. They fell on their faces and they presented him 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, the gold spoke to who he was as king. They were like, you are God and king. That's what the gold represents. And then they gave him frankincense, and frankincense speaks to his role as a priest. And then they gave him myrrh. So myrrh speaks to his death. So when the wise men or the magi showed up to Jesus, when they finally found him, they had MapQuest and they're like, we're going to have to turn the page and they travel from Parthian Empire all the way to the Roman. It's just, they show up and they show you what they understand about who Jesus is by giving him gold, who they said, that's you being king. Frankincense, that's you as a priest, and myrrh, and they're like, you're gonna die. They understood all of these things. It's unbelievable. Anyways, church in Smyrna was getting crushed, and so that's what I want you to recognize in Smyrna. The next church is a church called Pergamos. Pergamos is really interesting because this is Pergamos. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for that gift. But thank you so much. Pergamos is mixed marriage. Whenever you think of Pergamos, it means mixed marriage. It's where 2 things that don't belong end up getting together. That is not what you want. It's kind of like a believer getting married to an unbeliever. That's just not going to work because they are unequally yoked. And so when they're unequally yoked, then there's going to be all kinds of craziness going on within that relationship. And that's what's going on in Pergamos. You have a mixed marriage. You have this church getting mixed up with the world, and it just is not good. Anyways, the next church is the church of Thyatira. Revelation chapter 2. This is the last one mentioned in Revelation chapter 2. You have this church called Thyatira. Now, this church has the idea of continual sacrifice. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have this church is most likely referring to the Roman Catholic Church, which is heartbreaking because there's a lot of Roman Catholics in the world. These people are so lost in their traditions. It's heartbreaking because they can't not see it. They're like, this is how it is because this is how it's always been. And they don't know how to think other than what they've been told. And so the Roman Catholic Church, many of them, not all of them, but many of them hold fast to a works-based salvation. They believe in transubstantiation, which is basically where they take communion and they believe that when they eat the bread, that it literally turns into the body of Jesus. They believe when they drink the wine that it literally turns into the blood of Jesus. No, Christ was suffered once. He died once, and it was for all. It was one time. And so this Thyatira is continually sacrificing Jesus over and over again. So it's heartbreaking. But they also confess their sins to priests, which should be done and away with. That's Old Testament. They also do water baptizing into the church. Like if you want to get born into the church, born again, you get born again spiritually into the church. Like you and I, even though you don't know me personally and I don't know you personally, if you're a believer, you and I were baptized into the same church, but it just happened spiritually. And so you need to recognize that this church was water baptizing infants by sprinkling water on their heads. And they're like, oh, they're born again and they're in the church. So they were misguiding the masses by telling them something that was incorrect. And they were leading them astray by telling them the wrong things. And so this church, Jesus writes a very stern letter to this church. And he's like, hey guys, if you don't change, you will be thrown into the great tribulation. And so that's remarkable. And so this church is the one church that is promised to be cast into the great tribulation. Hey, thank you for that gift, man. Thank you so much. Hoff, thank you, Mr. Hoff. But when you continue reading in Revelation chapter 3, in Revelation chapter 3, he writes the next church, and this church is church in Sardis. This church had a reputation that it was alive, but it was dead. And so that's something to be mindful of. This is something that we could ask ourselves. Do you have a great reputation where everybody's like, man, that person is on fire for the Lord, and you're fooling everybody, but you're not fooling God? And so that's something that we need to think on. Revelation chapter 3, verse 7, we get to the next church, and this is a church called Philadelphia. Philadelphia, this church is known for brotherly love or friendly fellowship. This one is something that is really, this is the church that has nothing bad said against them. There's nothing bad said against the Philadelphian church. And so this was the missionary church. And so Jesus, the title that he chooses here is the door. Like, he's got the keys, there's a door open. So basically God, or Jesus, he opens the door, and the Philadelphians, they just went through it. They're like, we're going into that mission field, or they're bringing people back into the church. Whichever way you want to look at it, doesn't matter. But they were being missionaries, and they were winning souls. And so that's really cool. But Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, there is a promise here. It says, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Now, this is really interesting because what's going on in this verse right here seems to be a picture of a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, I want you guys to understand, I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. If you disagree with me, please don't yell at me if you disagree. It is a secondary issue. I mean, it's unbelievable how Christian people can be. If you see this, if you disagree with me on this one, then I will fight you. It's crazy. Like, the videos that I made on why I believe it, it's just like people just come out of the woodwork and they show you how Christian they can be. It's crazy. But I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, and I got a lot of reasons for it, and I know that other people disagree, and I know that they got a lot of reasons for it too. I would just challenge you to dive on in there and see where you land, because we are to test all things and hold fast that which is good. In Acts chapter 17, verse 11, Paul basically exhorts the Bereans because they received the word with all readiness, but then they searched the scriptures to find out whether these things were so. And so Paul, think about Paul. Paul, the apostle Paul, went up to the Bereans and he was like, hey, Bereans, this is how it is. And the Bereans were like, okay, Paul, thanks for telling us. I'm going to search the scriptures anyway. And then they would get in there and they would be like, okay, hey, Paul, turns out what you said was correct. Thanks for letting us know. And so that's what he was like, hey, man, that's what we should be like. So we need to test all things and get in there and see if it makes sense. Anyways, moving on, Revelation chapter 3, the last church in these church ages, all right? The last church is, thank you, Winnie. The last church is the Laodicean church. And so the Laodicean church here is really interesting because this is the only church out of these 7 churches that have nothing good said about it. There is nothing good said about this church, and it's heartbreaking. And so it's just like, my goodness, this is the church age that I believe we are in right now in the world. I believe all the other churches are still in existence right now, but I think the primary church in the world right now could be summarized as a Laodicean church. One of the reasons is just because, people, from all over the place, like you can just turn on YouTube and like go to like a church service and just see what they're doing in there and see what they're talking about and see how off they are on all the doctrinal issues. And so they get so far gone, then the people have no idea and they don't stand a chance because they're just going to church because they think that that's what it's all about. I told you guys about that one guy I led to the Lord in the middle of the gym, and he was going to a church that was, very well known in my neck of the woods, and he was going there for like 9 years, had no idea how to know for sure he could get to heaven. And I'm like, you've been going to church? And he's like, yeah, I've been going to church like almost every Sunday. And I'm like, you didn't know? And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of people who go to church who have no idea. And I'm like, that's heartbreaking. And so when you go into when you continue reading in Revelation chapter 3, you have this Laodicean church. In verse 20, it says, Jesus says this in verse 20. He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him and he with me. What's so interesting about this is that it seems that Jesus is outside the church in the Laodicean church. And so just something to pay attention to. Jesus should be in the church, but in Laodicea, it seems to be outside. He's like knocking on the door outside. He's like, if anybody can hear me, I'm talking to the individual inside. He's like, can anybody hear me? Listen, open up, please. And so he's crying out. He's trying to get in there, but the church is keeping him out, as it seems. Revelation chapter 4 and 5, we get in onto these two chapters here are so unbelievable. Revelation chapter 5 is one of my favorite. That's Revelation 3 verse 20, Bonnie. But Revelation chapter 5 is one of my favorite chapters in the entire Bible, just because you could just go everywhere with it. But in Revelation chapter 4, you are introduced to these 24 elders, and you see them again in Revelation chapter 5. But in Revelation chapter 5, what I want you to understand here is that John is having this vision, and he sees God the Father sitting on the throne. And so God the Father is sitting on the throne, and John is looking around, and John just starts crying, and he is sobbing uncontrollably. And then an elder goes up to him, and he's like, "Why are you crying?" And then John's like, "Because nobody can take the scroll." And then the elder was like, "Well, don't worry about it. There is somebody who is worthy." And then he points and he looks and he sees a lamb as though it had been slain. He's like, "There, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David has prevailed." And so what John sees is then he sees the lamb as though it had been slain go up to the Father and take the scroll from the Father, and then now he's holding on to it. So God the Father had it, and then God the Son came up and took it from him. And you see two personages of the Trinity in Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5 and Daniel chapter 7, the visions that they have there are really, they kind of parallel one another in a roundabout way, because in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel describes what he sees, and he's like, "Hey, I see the Ancient of Days, and there was one that was the Son of Man." And so Daniel just describes them different ways. Ancient of Days, God the Father, and then Son of Man, which is Jesus Christ. Here you see the one sitting on the throne, which is representing God the Father. And then you see the lamb as though it hadn't been slain, and that's clearly a picture of Jesus. So Daniel and John are seeing the same thing, just from different perspectives at different points in time. And it's really kind of cool to see what's going on here. But these 24 elders seem to be a picture of the church, and we've talked about that a lot. So if you are looking for a great pre-tribulation viewpoint, I would encourage you to understand who the 24 elders are, because the 24 elders seem to be the church. And the reason why is because in 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter is talking to the Jewish Christians who were persecuted, and they got chased out of Jerusalem because they were following Jesus Christ. So the Jews in Jerusalem chose Jesus, and they were like, "Hey, Jesus is the Messiah." But then the Pharisees and the Sadducees got all mad about it, and so they started persecuting those Christian Jews, and they pushed them out of Jerusalem. And after they pushed them out of Jerusalem, Peter writes them a letter, and he's like, "Hey guys, you need to know that you are kings and priests." And so when you recognize who these kings and priests are, you're like, well, who are the kings and priests in the entire Bible? You have Melchizedek, Jesus, and the church. There are only 3 bodies of kings and priests in the entire book of the Bible. You have Melchizedek, Jesus Christ, and the church. You and I, today, in 2024, what is December 13th, 2024, you and I are kings and priests. Really fascinating. But everybody has been a king and priest from Acts chapter 2, because that's when the church was born. In Acts chapter 2, at day of Pentecost, when the church was born, to whenever the rapture occurs, everybody that was born again in that time period, whether 2,000 years, whatever it is, will be a king and priest. Now, that's not the same story for the Old Testament saints, and that is not the same story for the tribulation saints. We're actually going to talk about that next time when we go live, because we're just going to have to. That's just what's going to happen. But anyways, what I want you to recognize in Revelation chapter 5 is that the 24 elders are in heaven before the seals are open. And that is so important to understand. Why? Because the tribulation doesn't start until the seals are opened. And anyways, the seals are open in Revelation chapter 6, which is the very next chapter. But in order to understand Revelation chapter 6, you need to go to Daniel chapter 9. Because in Daniel chapter 9, you are given this 490-year prophecy. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's the coolest prophecy, I think, in the entire Bible. 490 years. But anyways, in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 through 27, you are given a time period of 490-year prophecy that has not yet been completed. 483 of those years have been completed. From the time that the command was given to go and rebuild Jerusalem was when the clock started, to the time that Jesus rode in on a donkey is when the clock stopped. And that concluded 483 years out of 490 years. And so now we're waiting for the remainder 7-year period to actually take place. And so that is what you and I would refer to as the 7-year tribulation. Or some people refer to it as the time of Jacob's trouble, even though more accurately, the time of Jacob's trouble seems to be more focused on the last 3.5 years. But, Daniel's 70th week, the time of Jacob's trouble, the 7-year tribulation, those are phrases that you'll often that you might be familiar with in some kind of capacity. Anyways, in Revelation chapter 6, what you see here in Revelation chapter 6 is the seals are opened. This is where the tribulation begins. So in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, there is going to be an Antichrist, or the man of sin, the son of perdition, whatever you want to call him. He is going to confirm a covenant with many for 7 years. We don't know when that's going to happen. But when he is down here on earth, he's going to sign the covenant. And when he is signing that covenant or confirming the covenant, however it's going to look like, when he's doing that down here on earth, what's going on up in heaven starts the tribulation at the same time that the Antichrist is going to be confirming the covenant. They are happening at the same time. Really interesting to consider the two different perspectives that we are given. But in Revelation chapter 6, you see these 4 horsemen that are showing up. The first one's the white horse. This white horse is the Antichrist. He is a counterfeit. He is a complete, he's a fake. He's an imposter of sorts. But that's the guy who is on the white horse. Moving on to Revelation chapter 7, you have the 144,000 Jewish people who are going to be sealed with the seal of God on their foreheads during this 7-year tribulation. They will be there. They will go through the entire 7-year tribulation. These Jews will be Jewish men, and they will be virgins. We learn about that in Revelation chapter 14. They have not defiled themselves with women. And so it's really interesting to see or imagine. I want you to, how many people can be, if you go to a football game, how many people can be can fit into a stadium? Isn't it 100 or 100,000 or something like that? I want you to imagine a whole stadium full of people and all of them just untouchable, because that's basically what's going on here, if not more. But just imagine that many of them, and they're just scattering. They just go all over the place, and they're untouchable. And so it's really fascinating to see this kind of stuff. But that's what's going on in Revelation chapter 7. You're introduced to 144,000. When we get to Revelation chapter 8 is, it says, now when he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. This is where many people believe that this is the halfway point in the tribulation. So you have 7 seals, you have 7 trumpets, and you have 7 bold judgments that are all throughout the entire book of Revelation. So the 7th seal is the 7 trumpets. And so it's really interesting to try to wrap your mind around this kind of concept, but that's the idea that is given here. But this silence in heaven for about half an hour seems to be at the 3.5-year mark in the tribulation. And we're going to talk about that. It'll make more sense when you get to Revelation chapter 11, because that's where the 2 witnesses come in. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that is happening for the first 3.5 years. And they all happen in the first 3.5 years, and they have to almost. And I can tell you why I believe that, and it's okay if you disagree with me. But I believe the seals and I believe the trumpets happen in the first 3.5 years, and I believe the bowl judgments happen in the last 3.5 years. And so that's something that you can consider as we're going over this recap. But in Revelation chapter 8, we are given these trumpet judgments, and these trumpet judgments are really fascinating to just notice the consistency of them, because the trumpets are 1/3 judgments. Everything that is impacted here on these trumpet judgments are impacted. It's up to it's 1/3 of whatever is being hit. So if the water is being hit, it's 1/3 of the water. If the trees are being hit, it's 1/3 of the trees. If the grass is being hit, it's 1/3 of the grass. And so that's something that you can pay attention to. Whenever you hear 1/3, it's going to be talking about the trumpets. But 4 trumpets are basically given to you in Revelation chapter 8. But in Revelation 8, verse 13, after the 4 trumpets, an angel shows up and he says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpets that are about to sound. Now, it's really fascinating that this angel, that we are told very clearly that an angel is going to be given a warning to the people on earth. This angel is going to just basically saying, look out, guys, you have not seen anything yet. If you think that what you've been through up until this point is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. And so this is a huge indicator of whatever is coming up is going to be so much worse than what the world has seen up until this point. And so you need to understand the severity of what this angel is saying. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And so that leads us into Revelation chapter 9. So in Revelation chapter 9, this is the fifth trumpet, or some people refer to it as a woe judgment, because the angel was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a woe judgment, or the fifth trumpet judgment, whichever one you would prefer to label this one as. They're the same thing. But in Revelation chapter 9, what you're told about here is that this angel goes and he unlocks the bottomless pit. And when he unlocks the bottomless pit, locusts come out. Now, we know that they're not locusts because John says they were like locusts. They had something like gold. Their faces were like the faces of men. They had hair like women's hair. They had teeth like lions' teeth. Like, it's a lot of like. And so he's trying to describe to you and I something that he doesn't know how to describe it. And I often use the analogy, I want you to imagine that you were born 1,000 years ago before airplanes were in existence. Like, if you tried to describe an airplane 1,000 years ago, you'd be like, it's a big bird. It was like a big bird. It was really noisy. There was like 100 people on this bird. I don't know how to tell you, like you would describe it in that kind of way. You would say it's like a bird, but it's not. And so here in Revelation chapter 9, John is doing the exact same thing to you and I. And he's like, hey, I don't know how to describe what I'm seeing, but this is how I'm going to do it. And so he's describing this demonic invasion. And so what's going on here in Revelation chapter 9 is he's describing a demonic invasion to where demons will be going all over the place. And it says in Revelation 9, verse 5, it says that they have power to torment mankind for 5 months. I want you to just appreciate the specifics of what's being talked about here. It's not 5.5. It's not about, it is literally for 5 months. This is going to happen. 5 months, bam. You can set your clock on it and you can be like, that's what's going to happen during the earth. But for 5 months, these demons are going to go and torment mankind on the earth during the tribulation. And this is during the first 3.5 years, which is remarkable. Revelation chapter 9, verse 13, we go to the next woe judgment, and this is where the second demonic invasion actually takes place. Joel describes this too. If you wanted to go read about it, I think it's in Joel chapter 1, verse 15 to like Joel chapter 2, verse like 13 or something like that. But in Revelation chapter 9, verse 13, you have the second demonic invasion. And these demons, this second demonic invasion, will have power over mankind to end them. And they will be, in Revelation chapter 9, verse 15, it says that they will have power to end 1/3 of mankind on the earth. That is why the angel was saying, whoa, 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 because he knew what was coming. And so if you knew that this was coming, you would probably do the same thing. This angel was like letting everybody know, guys, whoa. And so this is what he was talking about. This is why it's so different than the first 4 trumpets, because the first 4 trumpets compared to these 2 demonic invasions were like child's play compared to how bad this trumpet judgment was. So it's something to just be mindful of. Revelation chapter 10, we see an angel here. We're not sure if this is Jesus or if it's just a great angel. There's 2 arguments to paint both sides of the picture. Some people believe it's Jesus, and some people think that it's just another mighty angel, and they have good reasons for both sides. It's a secondary issue at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect any doctrinal issues. Revelation chapter 11, this chapter right here is something that we really need to... Revelation chapter 11, I say this every recap, but I want you guys to understand how important Revelation chapter 11 is. When you start just seeing and connecting the dots, like I don't know if there's anybody else in here who like can agree with me on this one. Maybe it's just me, but Revelation chapter 11 is it's a checkpoint in my mind. It's like the true north as far as like lining these things up in end times. And the reason is because of what takes place in Revelation chapter 11. So in Revelation chapter 11, what you have is you have these two witnesses that you're introduced to. Now, they are closely associated with the temple, because in Revelation chapter 11 verse 2, it talks about the temple. He's like, "Hey, don't worry about the outside. That's for the Gentiles. Just measure the inside of this temple." Now, somebody asked a question on one of the TikTok videos, and they're like, could this temple be talking about our bodies as a temple? And I was like, that's a great question. But here, it's not talking about our bodies, because these two witnesses are not going to be standing in front of my body. It's not like, it's just like, guys, please, no. But these two witnesses, they're going to be standing in front of a literal temple. And so when you couple Revelation chapter 9, verse 27, along with that, in Revelation chapter 9, verse 27, it says that the Antichrist, or the prince that is to come, will basically cause all the sacrifices and offerings to cease. And so in order for there to be sacrifices and offerings, there needs to be a literal temple. That's why if you pay attention to what's going on over in Israel, the Jewish people want nothing more than to build this third temple. It is like what they are just chomping at the bit to do right now. And so that's very provocative, because when you understand that from our point of view as a Christian, if you're a born again believer right now, you and we should understand that them building a temple sounds really cool, but it's absolutely heartbreaking, because God already paid all. He paid it all. And so when you look at it from a lost person's point of view, you're like, hey, they want to build a third temple, but that means that they don't believe that Jesus completed it. They don't, and so that's what we need to recognize. And so the Jewish people, not all of them, but the lost, the Orthodox Jews, they are just wanting a third temple so badly. And so, anyways, Revelation chapter 11, these two witnesses are closely associated with this third temple that is going to be built sometime in the near future. But in Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, it says these two witnesses their ministry is going to last for 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. But it's basically saying 3.5 years. So why this is so important is because these two witnesses are basically standing right in front of the temple. They're going to be right in front of the temple for 3.5 years. And why I'm telling you, or telling you my opinion, you can test all things as per usual, but they're going to be in front of it for 3.5 years, and it's going to be during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. Now, why is that? It's that way because when you read Revelation chapter 13, we are told that the beast is going to be given authority for 3.5 years. So you have the two witnesses that are going to be untouchable for 3.5 years, and you have the beast that is given authority for 3.5 years. Well, 3.5 and 3.5 is 7 years, but which goes where? Which one, when do they get it? Well, I propose to you that Revelation chapter 11, these two witnesses will be there for the first 3.5 years, and they're going to be protecting that temple. And that means that the Antichrist can't go into the temple until the two witnesses are ended. And they're not going to be able to be touched until their ministry is done, which is 3.5 years. And so I'm saying that in order for the Antichrist to go into the temple and sit as God and make everybody worship him as if he is God, which 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 talks about, the two witnesses need to first be removed. And so he can't go in until the two witnesses are eliminated. And so that's why I think it's very Revelation chapter 11 is wonderful to me. Anyways, nobody knows who these two witnesses are. John didn't seem to know who they were, which, I think is very interesting, because he would have said Moses and Elijah, I think, if he actually recognized them, because he's seen Moses and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. Maybe it's not important for us to really know who they are. Obviously, it's just interesting. It's always a conversation that comes up. But in Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, it says, "The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly." Now, what I want you to know is that Amber, I'm okay. I'm okay in pain. Okay, Amber. Well, thanks for letting me know. I told people at the beginning of this, I told them about what was going on, and I asked them to pray for you. So you had a whole bunch of people, which is very cool. Thank you for letting me know, and thank you for letting everybody else know. Amber is here, so that is awesome. We'll continue praying for you for sure. But in Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, it says the second woe is past. Now, what basically is going on here is that if the two witnesses are here for the first 3.5 years, then that means that the seals and the trumpets are all a part of the first 3.5 years. Because it says in Revelation chapter 11, after the two witnesses die and they rise again, then they ascend up into heaven. It says after that, then the second woe is past. And so that's really interesting to pay attention to as far as like the order of events, because that's a challenging thing about eschatology. Like when you start diving into it, eschatology is just the fancy word for a study of the last things. Eschatos, the last things. Ology, a study of. So it's just the study of the last things. That's what eschatology means. But in Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, it says, the second woe is past, and it says, behold, the third woe is coming quickly. So it's really interesting to see that the two witnesses are basically your plumb line to figuring things out, because you understand that they are here for 3.5 years. And then once you understand that, you're like, well, if they're protecting the temple, and I know that the Antichrist has to go in and sit down in the temple, but he's not going to be able to, because those two witnesses, anybody who tries to mess with those guys, they're going to devour them. You're like, okay, well, it seems to make this much sense. Anyways, moving on to Revelation chapter 12. In Revelation chapter 12, what you have here in Revelation chapter 12 is a really interesting chapter. This chapter is so good. I love this chapter so much. But Revelation chapter 12, you have this story of Israel. And it's really kind of cool because you have three players that are mentioned in Revelation 12. You have the woman, you have the child, and you have the dragon. The woman represents Israel. The child is Jesus, and the dragon is Satan. But basically, Revelation chapter 12 is it's like 1,000-mile-an-hour flyby. Like if the story is of Israel is down here, and you're in a plane and you're flying over it, you're going over it that fast. That's basically what Revelation chapter 12 is. It's touching on like some highlights of Israel's history throughout their existence. And so it's really interesting. Revelation chapter 12, really, really good stuff going in there. We've unpacked that. Moving on to Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, John sees this beast coming out of the sea. He has 7 heads. He's got 10 horns and 10 crowns. And so in order to understand Revelation chapter 13, you need to go and understand Revelation chapter 7. We've done all of this. All of this is uploaded to YouTube. There's a YouTube link up here. So this is just a recap for those of you who might have missed something. But in Revelation chapter 13, you see this beast. And so this beast with 7 heads is really, it goes hand in hand with Daniel chapter 7, because in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has this vision. And the first vision that he sees is he sees a lion coming out of the sea. Thank you, Sherry. Yes, thank you, Amber. This is the YouTube. If you guys wouldn't mind going to subscribe over there, I would appreciate it, just in case they get TikTok and they get rid of TikTok. YouTube is the only other thing that I got. But Daniel chapter 7, he sees a lion coming out of the sea. That's a picture of Babylon. Thank you, Yogi. Hello, Yogi. Then he sees a bear coming out of the sea. That represents the Medo-Persian Empire. And then he sees a leopard coming out of the sea. That represents Alexander the Great, or the Greek Empire. And then he sees this 4th beast, which was different than all the other ones. And so Daniel's like, what's going on with this beast right here? He's like, I want to know about that beast. And so anyways, that beast had 10 heads, 10 horns. And when you read Daniel chapter 7, what you'll find is that the horns represent kings. So on this beast that was unlike all the other beasts, there's 10 kings attached to it. But then when you keep on reading, you see that he plucks out 3 of the kings. And so now you're left with 7 kings. But then out of the 7 kings, there's one that rises up. And so it's really interesting. But these Revelation chapter 13, that beast that Daniel saw all the way back in Daniel chapter 7, that beast is what we are seeing here in Revelation chapter 13. So these 7 heads, if you read Revelation 17, you see these 7 heads represent 7 mountains. In the Bible, when you look at a mountain symbolically, it's a picture of a government or a kingdom. You can see a picture of that in Daniel chapter 2, because in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel sees another vision, and he's like, I saw a stone. The stone struck the image, got destroyed. And then that stone hit the earth, and it became a giant mountain, and it filled up the entire earth. Now, obviously, it's not a literal mountain. Like, the earth doesn't just become a mountain. He's talking symbolically. The mountains represent kingdoms. And so it's really kind of cool to see this kind of stuff. You're our great dude. Thank you. But anyways, Revelation chapter 13, you're introduced to, this is where we are introduced to the beast. There's 2 beasts, individuals in Revelation 13. You have the Antichrist and the false prophet. But in Revelation 13, verse 5, we see that he is given authority for 42 months. Now, that is just another way of saying 3.5 years. So this Antichrist is going to have power for 3.5 years. It's not over the entire world, but it's going to be a very significant power, because you see him having to contend with the 10 kings. He's going to subdue 3 of them, and so then there's going to be 7 left, and then he himself is the 8th, and he's going to have, kings at his disposal, and they're going to be his little minions in a roundabout way. But he's also going to be contending with other people in the world. It's not just going to be like a walk in the park. It's going to be an actual, he's going to be juggling people and telling people what to do, and like using fear and tactics and miracles and all kinds of things to try to get people to fall in line. But all while he's doing that, the 144,000 are running around. There's going to be an angel that comes down preaching the everlasting gospel. People are going to be pulled in every kind of direction, trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And it's just going to be mass deception. But in Revelation chapter 13, you're introduced to the false prophet in Revelation 13, verse 11. Says, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns and like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Fascinating. And he does all kinds of miracles in the presence of the first beast. So it says in the presence of the first beast. So there's 2 beasts here. And so this false prophet is basically going to be doing everything, and then the world's going to see the false prophet doing a whole bunch of cool stuff. They're going to think the false prophet is cool, and then the false prophet's going to be like, you think I'm cool? Well, you guys should worship that guy. And so they're naturally going to fall in line, and then that's when the mark of the beast is going to enter the scene. The mark of the beast is not going to come out until the Great Tribulation. That's why when Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus is talking to Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, he's talking to all of them, and he's like, hey guys, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, let him who reads understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Here in Revelation chapter 13, this is where the abomination of desolation is going to enter the scene. In Revelation 13, which is in the Great Tribulation. This kicks off the Great Tribulation. So when the image is erected in the temple, this is what starts the Great Tribulation. That's why Jesus is like, hey, when you see the abomination of desolation, get out of Judea, run, because that is when there will be great tribulation. And so he's letting you know what's going to start the great tribulation. And so it's really fascinating. Anyways, that's what's going on in Revelation chapter 13. But this image is going to be placed inside the Holy of Holy place, the Holy of Holies, and that is a pattern of what took place back in the book of Daniel. Because in the book of Daniel, Jesus in Matthew 24, he's like, hey guys, you guys remember the Daniel the prophet? Go check him out. Go look at what Daniel the prophet said. Because in Daniel, you'll read about a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes was a type or a model or a foreshadow of what was going to happen in the future. And what I mean by that is way back then, Antiochus Epiphanes hated the Jews. He chased them all around. He persecuted them. And then he even went into the temple and he built a statue of Zeus inside the temple. And that is what Jesus referred to as the abomination of desolation. So Jesus was pulling from that. And he's like, when you see that, then get out of Judea, because then there will be great tribulation. And so it's really interesting. He's telling you it's a timeline. There's a timeline here. Anyways, Revelation 13, he continues on. This image is going to be given breath, and we're going to talk about that later on. Not tonight, but we'll talk about it next time, because it's just interesting stuff coming up. It's just I'm looking forward to it. I think we got a long way to go before we're done with the book of Revelation. I'm just letting you guys know right now. I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm excited for when we go live next. I'm excited right now, but I'm excited for what we're going to talk about next time too. Revelation chapter 13, the mark of the beast comes out, and you're not going to be able to buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast. People have been saying that it's been the end of the age or the end days for 1,000 years, and I understand that, but it never applied back then because nobody could ever control whether or not you bought or sold because of technology. And I need you to understand that technology answers a ton of questions that people didn't know how to explain 50 years ago. If you were a scholar 50 years ago, you didn't know how to explain a lot of these things. If you were a scholar 100 years ago, you didn't know how to explain a lot of these things. But now here we are today, we know how to explain a lot of these things because technology answers so many questions. And so it's really kind of cool because we're getting a lot of light that is revealed to you and I as we go about our time. The more we're going through time, the more light that is being revealed. And then that is what Daniel says in Daniel chapter 12, where it says, knowledge shall increase. We're seeing that taking place right here. And we're actually increasing in knowledge as we are sitting in our houses right now. Like, we're not even looking at each other. You guys are all just looking at me on your phones. It's just really weird. Stop it. Anyways, if you guys are new here, we're just going through the book of Revelation, a recap. All of these are uploaded to YouTube. There's a YouTube link up here in my TikTok profile. If you wanted to go subscribe over there, I'd appreciate it, just because, they're talking about getting rid of TikTok. If they get rid of TikTok, then we won't be able to hang out anymore. But if you're looking for a verse-by-verse Bible study, I upload all of these to YouTube. And I would encourage you to get involved in some kind of verse-by-verse study, because that's the best way to learn the Bible. It's an amazing thing. It's so fun. And I'm enjoying it. But as per usual, no matter who you follow or you tag along with, test all things, ask questions, hold fast to that which is good, and be like the Bereans. All right, moving on. Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 14. Thank you, Christina. In Revelation chapter 14, you see the 144,000 talked about here. Star Jacob, what's up, man? Good to see you. Sherry, yay. Hey, y'all. You see the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 14. And this is an amazing scene, because in Revelation chapter 14, verse 1, you see the 144,000 standing with Jesus, because they're standing with the Lamb. And so what I mean by why this is amazing is because John was on the island of Patmos, and then he has a vision. And then John is looking so far out into the future about all these things that are going to happen in the future. But here in Revelation chapter 14, John looks so much further out into the future than what he was previously doing. Because here in Revelation chapter 14, what he's doing here is he's looking out further after the tribulation, and he's looking into the millennium, because Jesus is here and he's standing with the 144,000. And so it's remarkable. I mean, it's remarkable. And so what I want you to really take away from this is that there were still 144,000. There wasn't 140,000. It wasn't just 100,000. No. However many they were to begin with, which was 144,000, they ended with 144,000. Hello, Dina. And so it's really kind of cool to see what's going on here. And so I want you to recognize this speaks to your salvation as well. You can use this as a tool to reinforce your eternal security. I believe if you are saved, then you are always saved. And so I want you to recognize that, because if he can protect these 144,000 physical human Jewish people, and he can protect them throughout the worst time period in human history, then how much more can he do, is spiritually speaking? He's like, no man's going to pluck them out of my Father's hand. Thank you, Krista. Thank you so much. So that's what's going on in Revelation chapter 14. But in Revelation chapter 14, there's also this angel that comes out, and he starts preaching the everlasting gospel to those who are left on the earth. And so what I want you to, thank you, Crystal, what I want you to be sensitive to, greetings, I want you to recognize that right when the mark of the beast comes out, the people on the earth are going to have a decision to make. So zooming back a little bit and just hey, what's up, man? Good to see you. Thomas, good to see you, man. So what's good? Zooming back a little bit. So the beginning of the tribulation starts with the signing of the covenant and the breaking of the seals. Both of those things happen at the same time. And then 3.5 years go. And then at the 3.5 year mark, that's when the Antichrist rises up. He overcomes the two witnesses. He ends them. Their bodies are in the streets for 3.5 days, and then the Antichrist goes into the temple, and then he sits down and he's like, "I'm God." And then the abomination of desolation is brought in, and that is when Jesus is like, "Hey, flee to the mountains." But what I want you to recognize is that it's not until that all of that takes place, and then the mark of the beast comes into play. But when the mark of the beast comes into play, while that's happening, while that's being introduced to the world, the 144,000 are still working their butts off. It's their last seconds. They're like, I am telling everybody about Jesus as much as I possibly can. All while they're doing that on the earth, There is an angel up in heaven who is preaching the everlasting gospel to the world. And that's interesting. That's just interesting. And so the people who get the mark of the beast are going to get the mark of the beast they're going to know it full of knowledge. They're going to understand exactly what's at stake. They're going to understand the implications. There's nobody who's going to get it without not just being, I just kind of stumbled in here and I was like, I got a tattoo, like, what is this? No, there's nobody that's going to be like that, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to be running around telling everybody about Jesus. They're going to see an angel and they're going to have a decision to make. And so that is what I want you to recognize. But what a different time to be alive during this time. Do you recognize how serious everything has completely changed in this 7-year period of tribulation? It is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anyways, that's Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 15 is basically a prelude to the bowl judgments. Now, the bowl judgments, remember, there were 7 seals, there were 7 trumpets, and there's 7 bowl judgments. Here in Revelation chapter 15, this is just like a real quick, like a prelude, a real quick, intermission, kind of like a commercial break, letting you know what's going on. But up in heaven in Revelation chapter 15, these angels come out of the temple of God, and they're carrying the bowls of wrath. They're carrying God's bowls of wrath. And they walk out of the temple, and then nobody else is allowed into the temple until the bowl judgments are complete. And so it's really fascinating seeing what's going on here, because God is in the temple alone. And it says that the whole temple was filled with the smoke from the glory of God. So nobody else was able to even go in there. He's like, get out. He's like, this is me. He's like, I'm doing this. And he's like, it's almost like him letting like everybody know. He's like, this is just me. He's like, it's all me. And so it's interesting to see how he's alone. It's almost like he's alone. He's alone. He's alone. He is alone in the temple. He's like not letting anybody else come in there with him until the bowl judgments are done. Revelation chapter 16, we get to, in Revelation chapter 16, we have the verse 14 through 20. We're going to come back to that. Who knows? I didn't skip it. That is something that we talked about. That's really good. We'll come back to Revelation chapter 14. But in Revelation chapter 16, we get to the bowl judgments. This is just a recap, by the way. I can't touch on everything, but I do try to do my best. Revelation chapter 16, we get to the bowl judgments, and the bowl judgments are so in contrast to the trumpet judgments were judgment of the thirds. So whatever was being impacted when it came to the trumpet judgments, it was a third of whatever, a third of the trees, a third of the grass. Here in Revelation chapter 16, whatever is being impacted, it's all of them. It is every single thing that is in the category. For example, Revelation chapter 16, verse 2, the first thing that gets the bowl judgment are those who chose to get the mark of the beast. So every single individual alive that chose to get the mark of the beast is going to have this bowl poured out on them. And they're going to have this loathsome sore that is going to be all over their body. And we talked about the sores, we talked about leprosy and how, this is an idiom for sin. Like leprosy, it starts on the inside and it works its way out. That is an idiom for sin. Here seems to be the same implication, because this is an external sore, so everybody's going to know, okay, you want to stay away from that guy. But Revelation chapter 16, verse 3 and 4, you have the next bowls that are poured out into the water. You have one bowl poured out on the sweet water, one bowl poured out on the salt water. All of the water is going to be turned into blood. That's crazy. And then the next bowl is going to be, this angel is going to pour out his bowl on the sun, and he's going to have power to scorch the mankind with fire. That's crazy. And so it's really interesting to see all of this kind of stuff taking place. It's not 1 second, one bowl, 1 second, another bowl, another second, another bowl. No, this bowl judgment's being poured out over the last 3.5 years. It's really, there's things that are happening, and it's difficult to say how much time is in between each bowl being poured out. But this is crazy stuff, and it's getting worse. The bowl judgments are getting worse and worse and worse. The next bowl judgment in Revelation chapter 16, verse 10 is poured out on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom became full of darkness. Now, we talked about this one before, because in order to have a throne, I believe that this is a literal throne. I think this throne is literally going to be in the temple. When he goes into the temple and he sits as God, I think he's going to have his throne in there. I think that's going to happen. That's my opinion. But this darkness is not just a regular darkness. Like if you look out your window right now, it's probably dark outside. No, this is a supernatural darkness. If you go back and if you read Exodus chapter 10, you will see that there was this darkness back in Egypt that could be felt. And that's really interesting. So this darkness could be felt, but not only could it be felt, but it also it was like this heavy kind of darkness. But what's also interesting in Exodus chapter 10 is if you keep reading, you'll learn that Israel did not have that darkness and they actually had light. And I think that's kind of cool. So that's kind of fun, but that's in Exodus chapter 10. Anyways, Revelation chapter 16 verse 12. In Revelation chapter 16 verse 12, you have the sixth bowl. Now the sixth bowl is where one of the angels pours out his bowl on the great river Euphrates. Now, what's interesting about this is this one doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, but it actually is. And the reason why is because, like, okay, so he pours out his bowl on the water, the great river Euphrates, but the river Euphrates was already blood. So why does this matter? This doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Well, it is because of what it does. It dries it up. And the reason why this is a big deal is because this is basically God basically like saying, let me hold the door for you, because he wants people to walk across it. And so because he allows this river to dry up, it's the equivalent of if you're like 10 feet away from the door and I just open the door for you and I just wait. I'm like, come on in. And so what Jesus is doing here is he's opening that door for the kings of the east to make their way across it because of what's going to happen once they cross it. And what happens after they cross over the great river Euphrates is they're basically all walking into a wine press. And so that's essentially why this is the sixth bowl judgment, not because of what happens to the river, but what happens after they cross. And so what happens after they cross is that they're all going to gather at a place called Armageddon. Now, I want you to recognize that we spent a lot of time trying to chase down Armageddon. And basically the main thing to understand is to recognize that Armageddon, it's not just one single battle. It is a campaign. It's multiple battles that take place. And so you can chase those down. I feel like we did a pretty good job because we're in the book of Joel, we were in Isaiah, we were in Revelation, we went over to Zechariah, and there's different battles that are being talked about. And so basically the idea here is in Revelation chapter 16, verse 16, it says, and they gathered them together at the place in Hebrew called Armageddon. So what I want you to recognize is that they're gathering in a place called Armageddon, but it doesn't say the Battle of Armageddon. It's almost a misnomer. And so they're gathering. So you have all these people together at Armageddon, and then there's a battle over in Basra. So if you go and read Isaiah chapter 63, what you'll find there in Isaiah chapter 63 is Isaiah sees somebody and he's looking out and he has this vision and he looks out in the vision and he's like, who is this who is coming from Basra, who is coming from Edom? And his clothes are glorious, is in apparel. He's clothed in glorious apparel. Thank you, Winnie. He's clothed in glorious apparel. And then Jesus responds and he's like, it is I who is mighty, who speaks in righteousness, mighty to save. And so that's what Jesus says. So Isaiah looks out and he sees Jesus, and then Jesus answers, and then Isaiah's like, well, he's like, why are your clothes red? And then Jesus is like, because I just got done dreading the winepress at Basra. And so Jesus is coming from Basra. And so that's giving you and I a clue that Jesus just was in this unbelievably just winepress situation where he was crushing his enemies in Basra. Now, where is Basra? If you look on a map, like here is Israel. Well, here to the east of Israel is Jordan. Inside Jordan, there's a place called Edom. And just south of Edom is Basra. So the Jewish people are going to flee all the way to Basra at some point in the Great Tribulation, or during the Great Tribulation, they're going to flee to Basra, and Basra means sheepfold. And so it's really interesting when you look at the Jewish people as sheep, because what did Jesus say when he was here in the book of Matthew? He's like, I did not come but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, the lost sheep. He's like, I'm after the sheep. And so it's interesting when you look at the Basra with the sheepfold, and the sheep are literally going to run into the sheepfold, and then that's when Jesus is going to show up and he's going to save them. But he is going to tread the winepress alone in Basra. Now, what's interesting about what takes place in Basra is that after he treads the winepress in Basra, he's going to be making his way all the way back to Jerusalem. And so it's going to be just like a stomping all the way down, all the way back to Jerusalem. And that's what you read about in Joel chapter 3. Because in Joel chapter 3, what you see there in Joel chapter 3 is there is another winepress that takes place at the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And where is the Valley of Jehoshaphat? It's basically in the Kidron Valley. It's the same kind of location. But the Valley of Jehoshaphat just basically is talking about how Jehovah has judged. It's going to be this place where another winepress is going to take place. But you see a winepress in Basra, and you see another winepress in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. The Valley of Jehoshaphat, if you were in Jerusalem right now and you looked outside the city walls, you could see where the Valley of Jehoshaphat is. So basically the idea is that Jesus is going to tread the winepress all the way in Basra, and then he's going to make his way all the way to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is right outside Jerusalem. He's making his way back to Jerusalem. Why does he want to go back to Jerusalem, or why is he making his way back to Jerusalem? Well, that's because that's where the Antichrist took over. Because in Zechariah chapter 14, you read in verse 1 and 2 that half of the city went into captivity. Now that is crazy. Half of Jerusalem is going into captivity? Yes, it is. That is yet future. But my point here is to get you to understand that there is going to be multiple battles. It's not just a battle of Armageddon. It's not just the battle of Armageddon. It is a campaign. It is multiple battles. And so you see a battle that takes place over in Basra. You see another one that takes place in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And you're just seeing just like this blood just going all over the place, which goes hand in hand in Revelation chapter 14. Because in Revelation chapter 14, verse 19, it says, "So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of God." I want you to imagine you have a bucket and you're just outside just gathering like grapes and stuff, and you just keep putting them in your little bucket, and then you just get in that bucket and you just start stomping on them, right? That's basically what's going on here in Revelation 14, verse 19. He's gathering all the grapes. He's like, that's what happens when he poured out the bowl on the great river Euphrates. He's like, I'm just getting the grapes inside the wine press. That's all I'm doing here with this bowl. He's like, all the grapes are just walking into the wine press. He's like, I'm going to stomp on them all. And so in Revelation chapter 14, verse 20, it says, "And the wine press was trampled outside the city." And so this wine press is going to be trampled outside of Jerusalem. And that's where Joel chapter 3 comes into play, because in Joel chapter 3, what you find is that is where the other wine press is, and it's outside the city. I think it's very important to pay or key in on the word outside. It is outside. Outside the city is right where the Valley of Jehoshaphat is, or the Kidron Valley, which seem to be the same thing. Anyways, that's Revelation chapter 16. Okay. Then, after Revelation chapter 16, we went to Revelation chapter 19, and we talked about Revelation chapter 19. We did a pretty fun study there. That was a good one because we bypassed chapter 17 and 18. Thank you, Peggy. We bypassed chapter 17 and 18 because I wanted to just keep on with the whole second coming theme and try to knock that out just to kind of give us a great idea of what it's actually going to be like. So I feel like we did a really good job in Revelation chapter 19. I had a lot of fun with that one. But in Revelation chapter 19, verse 11, this is where the revelation of Jesus Christ actually is. Revelation chapter 19, verse 11. If you want to see where the revelation of Jesus Christ is, Revelation chapter 19, verse 11. This is where it is. This is where you see Jesus, him showing up. He is now entering the scene for the second time. And so that is the unveiling of Jesus. Revelation chapter 19, verse 11. We talked a lot about this. This was a great study. I'm telling you, we're not going to go into all this kind of stuff. We went all over the place. We talked about, how in Revelation chapter 19, verse 20, it talks about how the beast and the false prophet were captured and thrown alive into the lake of fire. It's very provocative diving into that, because if you go back to Isaiah chapter 14, what you'll find is where Isaiah 14 is talking about Lucifer. It's talking about Satan in many different ways. It talks about Lucifer, you who have weakened the nations. And, it's really interesting diving into that chapter and trying to make it fit like what we understand, and try to see how it trying to understand this verse, and what is this verse talking about? Who is this verse talking about? And how does it apply over here? And how does this fit here? And where does this piece go? It's really hard. It's really difficult, but it's a fun journey. But in Isaiah chapter 14, it seems that this Antichrist, what we're told is that he's not going to be buried. He's not going to be buried. And so then all of a sudden, if he's not going to be buried and it says that the grave is going to spit him out, it's just like, well, wait a second, is he going to die? Well, I don't think he's going to die, but maybe at the same time, maybe he will die. But maybe he'll be resurrected. We're going to actually talk about that next time because that's what Isaiah 14 talks about. That's going to be a good one. We'll unpack that one a little bit more. It's really fun to just try to be like, is it this, or is it this and this? Like, it's going to be one of these. Which one is it? Which one seems to make the most sense? Well, I'll give you a way to think about it when we actually get there. But that's all in Revelation chapter 19. Really good study there. Okay, so that's the review. That's just a recap. That's everything that we talked about before. All of these studies are uploaded to YouTube. If you guys are looking for a verse-by-verse Bible study, I would encourage you guys to get into one because that's the best way that you're going to learn, I think. That's the best way that I learn. I need every word read. I need everybody to tell me who this person is, who these people are, where are they, what's the vibe, and what's the tension, what empire is in control right now. So that's what we try to do here. And so if you're looking for a way or a Bible study like that, I upload, yes, thank you, Christina. There's a link up here in my TikTok profile. If you wanted to go check it out, you are more than welcome to. We've done Revelation, Daniel, Ruth, Hebrews, James, John, Acts, Romans. We've done all the Pauline epistles. We've done Isaiah, Matthew, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, and now we are doing Revelation again, which is really kind of cool. We've been doing this for about a year and a half, and if you've been here, you guys know how much I've learned, and I bet you guys have learned a ton too. So thank you guys for being here. But that is that's just the recap. Now we are going to dive into Revelation chapter 17 and 18, which is the whole point of this entire study. But before we do, I want you guys to understand, I'm giving you my opinion. We are to test all things and hold fast to that which is good. We are to be like the Bereans in Acts chapter 17, verse 11, because he says, these were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, and that they received the word with all readiness, and they searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. And so we need to understand that we are held accountable to receive the word, but then search the scriptures. It's the tough thing to do. We need to search the scriptures, which takes time and energy and effort. And so it's not just going to happen. We're just not going to, sleep on our Bible and, it's just not just going to, seep into our brain. That's not how it works. Anyways, the main thing about this entire study is always going to be the main thing. And it's always the gospel. How do you know for sure that you can get to heaven? How do you get to heaven? That's the thing. That is what I want. That is the primary issue. Everything that we're talking about here in the book of Revelation is secondary. Thank you, Amber. Yep, this is the YouTube right here if you're interested. But how do you get to heaven? Well, you need to understand that you are lost first. You need to understand the bad news. The bad news is for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's the bad news. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So if you understand that, if you understand that you are a sinner, well, then all of a sudden that you can start looking for a savior. Romans 6:23 lets you know that you are under the death penalty. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. It is unbelievable. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, period. It's not through Jesus Christ our Lord, and it is through Jesus Christ our Lord. And I want you to recognize there are other people out there who are going to tell you that I'm wrong in that. It's not just Christ and Christ alone. No, it's Christ, and you need to get water baptized too. That's what they'll say. I will argue completely differently, and that is a hill I absolutely will die on. It is for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And so I would propose to you that those people who add water baptism or the whole law situation thing, and I would argue that that is a different gospel that other people, that Paul was talking about in Galatians chapter 1. So we need to be hypersensitive to that. And so if you are going to spend all your time trying to understand some kind of idea in the Bible, I would encourage you to dive into salvation. Soteriology is what it's called, the study of salvation. Get in there, understand it, and know it forward and backwards, and have no doubt about it, because it's a free gift. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. It is belief. Now, obviously, if you get born again and you actually believe all those things, then all the works are going to have to take place. You will naturally want to get baptized, but it's not, those things are secondary. What is primary is faith. For by grace you have been saved through faith. Okay, that's the primary issue. Let's go ahead and get back into Revelation chapter 17. All of these are uploaded to YouTube. If you wanted to go check them out, you are more than welcome to. All right, Revelation chapter 17. So Revelation chapter 17 is the hardest chapter to explain. Some of you guys might understand it, but it is the hardest chapter to explain for me. In my opinion, I can talk about other chapters in here rather easily, but Revelation chapter 17 is difficult because of how many things are actually going on here and the rest of everything that you need to understand Revelation chapter 17. So we're going to do the best that we can. Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 1, it says this: Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Okay, so here in Revelation chapter 17, this angel comes up to John, and he's like, Hey, John, follow me. I'm going to show you what's going to happen to this great harlot. Now, the question is, who is this great harlot? Now, just so you guys can understand, just going forward, this great harlot is a picture of the fake or false church. There's a lot of false churches in the world right now, but there is one who is the mother of them all. Thank you, December. Thank you so much. There is a false church. False Christendom is the idea of what's going on here. Any church that preaches something different than what Paul gave us, the gospel, right? The gospel that Jesus died according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day according to the scriptures. Any church that preaches something different than that is going to be encapsulated in this idea of this false Christendom. So in Revelation chapter 17, we see that this great harlot or this false church is sitting on many waters. Now the question is, what is the many waters that he's talking about here? Well, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 15, we are told what the waters represent. Because things like water, this is not literal water. We're told what the water actually is. This is not literal. This is why the book of Revelation is so difficult, because sometimes when they say mountain, sometimes it means mountain. But then other places where it says mountain, it's not an actual mountain. And so same here, you have the waters being used symbolically. It's not literal waters, and we understand that because in Revelation 17, verse 15, it says, Then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So we understand that water is used symbolically here. And so this is why it's so challenging to be like, okay, is this water or no? Is this a mountain? What's going on with these seven heads? What's the horns? What's the horns all about, right? And so you're trying to understand and you're trying to keep up, and it's tough. And it's okay. Just accept that it's difficult, because it's tough. It's tough. And so that's why this chapter specifically is difficult to understand. Anyways, Revelation chapter 17, this great harlot is sitting on many waters, which is, many peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, or whatever. But in Revelation 17, verse 2, it talks about how the kings of the earth committed fornication with this false church. So you have the kings mixing, in a sense, with the false church. Now, what's interesting is that this mother of harlots that we're going to be talking about, this great harlot, when the Bible uses a woman symbolically, I want to say almost every time, if not every time, when a woman is used symbolically, it's used in a religious entity. For example, if you go back into the Old Testament and you think about Israel, well, Israel was the wife of Jehovah, right? So Israel was the wife to Jehovah. Well, here in the New Testament, the church is the bride. You and I are referred to as the bride. So those are women. That is a women type of symbol that's being used there. You have Israel being the wife. You have the church being the bride. And then here in Revelation chapter 17, you're seeing this great harlot, which is a mother, according to Revelation chapter 17, verse 5, where it says Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. You're seeing another picture of a woman being used in a religious entity kind of way. And so it's really fascinating here, because when you go back to Revelation chapter 2 in the church in Thyatira, you see Jezebel being introduced into the picture. And so it's not the church in Thyatira wasn't talking about an individual woman, Jezebel. I mean, even though there was a woman, Jezebel, it's talking about the idea of that woman. It's talking about the religious entity that spiraled out of control because of that woman, Jezebel. And so that is the idea there. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Revelation chapter 17, verse 2, it says that these kings of the earth committed fornication. Now, we talked about the church in Pergamos before, and if you remember the church in Pergamos, what you have there is you have a mixed marriage. It's like if a woman is a born-again believer and she marries a man who is lost, that is a mixed marriage. That is unequally yoked. And so you're seeing like two people on different levels, and it just it's not gonna do well at all. It's like pouring diesel in a gas kind of vehicle. It's just not gonna work. It's not gonna run well. And so that's what's going on here in this church. These kings are committing fornication with her, with this false church. And basically what the idea that's going on here is that this is talking about spiritual fornication. They are spiritually cheating. And who are they cheating on? Well, with God Almighty. Because you shall have no other gods before me, right? That's basically the idea of what we're understanding all throughout the Old Testament and into the New, obviously. But here, these people are committing spiritual fornication on God Almighty. And they're cheating on him with this false church. So in Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, it says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So here you have two individuals. You have a beast that is in the picture, and then you have a woman on top of the beast. So you have a beast and you have a woman on top of the beast. And so basically what we're going to see about in Revelation chapter 17 is wherever the beast goes, the woman is on top. They're both going together. There's actually a book out there that says The Woman Rides the Beast. That's the name of the book. You could read it. It's really informative. But it's about this, what we're reading about here. But anyways, Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, "This woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So we're going to talk about these 7 heads and we're going to talk about these 10 horns, but I just want to get the feel of the entire thing. So let's just keep on reading. In verse 4, it says, "The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. But the angel said to me, Why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns." Okay, it says in verse 8, it says, "The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7 and is going to perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they received authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast." Really interesting. So after reading that or listening to it, you can understand why it's so challenging to unpack this kind of stuff, because it just forces you to go all over the place. Okay, so let's go all the way back to Revelation chapter 17, verse 4, because here, or verse 3 and 4. In verse 3 and 4, you see this beast that is introduced to you, and you see this woman that is introduced to you. The woman is clearly a picture of a false church, the false Christendom church. It's a fake church. It's a counterfeit. But this beast that we see in verse 4, the beast is the same beast that we read about in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. In Revelation chapter 13, let's go back to Revelation 13, verse 1 real fast. Because in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name." So this beast is the same beast that's there in chapter 13, and it's the same beast that we read about in Daniel chapter 7. Now, the beast that is talked about here is the final stage of the Antichrist kingdom. So the 7 heads that we are reading about here in Revelation 17, verse 3, the 7 heads are 7 mountains. Now, we know that they're mountains because of verse 9. Revelation 17, verse 9, in Revelation 17, verse 9, it says, "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains." So you're getting this weird picture of what the heck are we looking at here, right? Like, what's going on? This is really challenging to explain. But these 7 heads are 7 mountains. Okay, now we talked about before how mountains sometimes when they're used are actual literal mountains, but other times they're symbolic. Here, I would propose to you that they are symbolic. The reason why they're symbolic is because in verse 10 it says there are also 7 kings. So if the mountain represent kingdoms, in verse 10 it says there are 7 kings, which, in order to have a kingdom, you need to have a king. So 7 kings, 7 kingdoms. And then it says that 5 have fallen. Now, the mountains don't fall, so that's why I don't think that they're literal mountains. So that's why I'm saying that I believe that these are symbols of kingdoms that were in the past. Now, what were the 7 kingdoms that were in the past? Well, if you look at Israel as a whole, what I think is important to remember is who were the ones who were oppressing the Jewish people. Well, if you go way back into the Old Testament, the very first nation or kingdom, if you will, that oppressed them was Egypt. Then after the people who oppressed them, if you read the book of Isaiah, you see that the Assyrians were then the next kingdom to oppress Egypt. And then after the Assyrians, who were after the Assyrians? Well, it was Babylon. And then after Babylon, then you had the Medo-Persian Empire. And then after the Medo-Persian Empire, you had the Greek Empire. Then you had the Roman Empire. And then after the Roman Empire, that Roman Empire just kind of fell apart. And now there's going to be a second Roman Empire that is going to emerge, which is what you and I would refer to, and many others just refer to it as this futuristic empire that is going to exist sometime in the future as the revived Roman Empire. And that will make more sense as we dive into it. But let's go back. Revelation 17, verse 3 says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads." So those 7 heads seem to represent those 7 kingdoms that we talked about just a moment ago. But there are 10 horns on this. Now, these 10 horns represent the 10 kings that we talked about in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7, we learn that there were 10 kings, and those, or 10 horns, and we're told in Daniel 7 that 10 horns represent kings. So you have 10 kings, and we know that there are going to be 3 of them that are going to be removed, which should leave you 7. And then after there are 7, that is when the Antichrist will arise up, and then he is going to take the reins. So basically, what you're seeing being painted here in Revelation chapter 17 is this is the idea. In Revelation chapters, okay, so there's going to be a period of 7 years of tribulation, right? There's going to be something that we refer to as tribulation, the first 3.5 years, which is the tribulation, and the second 3.5 years, which is the Great Tribulation. So for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, there is going to be a false church that is going to be the prominent player on the board when it comes to religion. There's going to be a false church. At the same time, during the first 3.5 years, there's also going to be a political system that is also going to exist at the same time, which is represented by the 10 kings. So for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, there's going to be the false church, the great harlot, and there's going to be the political system, which is the 10 kings. That is for the first 3.5 years. Then, for the second 3.5 years, that great harlot is going to be devoured by the kings. The harlot, the false church, is going to be ended. And the reason why it's going to be ended is because Lucifer is going to be like, no, you're going to only worship me. I want all the worship. And so he's going to put to death the false church, and he's going to say, you worship me now. So for the first 3.5 years, people can still worship whatever they really want to do during the first 3.5 years. But then at the second 3.5 years, when the Antichrist goes into the temple, he's going to sit as God. He's going to say, I'm God. You're going to point out me. And he's going to stop everybody to worship everybody else but him. That's going to be what's going on. So for the first 3.5 years, there's going to be the false church. At the same time, in the first 3.5 years, there's going to be the 10 kings. Then, during the second 3.5 years, that false church is going to go away, and then the Antichrist is going to be the guy who's going to be like, you worship me now. At the same time, when the Antichrist shows up, those 10 kings that were in the first 3.5 years, they're going to move over into the Great Tribulation, but the 10 kings, they're going to lose 3 of them. They're going to go down to 7. And the reason why they're going to lose 3 of them is because of what is mentioned in Daniel chapter 7, where it says 3 of them were plucked up by their roots or subdued. So basically why they go from 10 kings in the first 3.5 years to 7 kings is because the Antichrist is now revealed. The Antichrist will be revealed in the Great Tribulation, and he is going to take the reins, and he's going to be like, I'm the captain now, you will listen to me. And so that's basically what's going on. So just to recap, you have 7 years of tribulation, 3.5 years, 3.5 years. For the first 3.5 years, you have the false church that is still running around doing the false church things. At the same time that the false church is doing her thing, you have the 10 kings basically setting up everything and doing, calling the shots politically and economically speaking. Then we migrate into the Great Tribulation, and in the Great Tribulation, the false church goes away, the Antichrist emerges, he goes into the temple, which is when the 2 witnesses die, because they're going to be there for 3.5 years, then they will go down, and then he will go into the temple, he's going to put in the abomination of desolation, he's going to breathe life into the image, he's going to say, you will worship me now, and then the false church is going away, and that religious system that was false Christendom is now going to rotate over to just being worship of the beast and the beast alone. And if you disagree with that, then you will be ended during the Great Tribulation. If you try to run away or say, I'm not doing it, your chances are they're going to lose their heads and whatnot. So he is going to be the religious system for the Great Tribulation. And then at the same time where you have the 10 kings, they're no longer 10 kings. They were, 3 of them were removed, so you go down to 7. And so that is what is happening in the idea of what we're reading here in Revelation chapter 17. Okay, Revelation chapter 17, verse 5. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 5, it says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Now, what's interesting about this is what we talked about last time, is that this false church is completely in contrast to what you and I are today. You and I, if you are a born-again believer right now, you and I are a part of the church. We are what is referred to as a chaste bride, a chaste virgin, right? That is how we are viewed from Jesus. That's how he views us. So in contrast to the church being referred to as a virgin, here, this false church, in contrast to a virgin, is being called a harlot. And so you have 2 churches. You have the one that is pure, and then you have the one that is completely defiled. And so you have 2 churches, one being the right one being the complete counterfeit, and that's basically the idea that's being painted here. But in Revelation chapter 17, you see this church, this is the church that was promised to go through the Great Tribulation. If you go all the way back to Revelation chapter 2, in Revelation chapter 2, what you have in verse 18, Revelation chapter 2, verse 18, you have this church called Thyatira, and Jesus writes a letter to the church in Thyatira, and he's like, hey guys, you who are in Thyatira, you better change your crap up, because if you don't, you are going to I'm going to cast you into the Great Tribulation. He says, repent And if you repent, then you're not going to go through the Great Tribulation. But if you don't repent, you will be going through the Great Tribulation. And so that's what's going on here in Revelation chapter 2, because in Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, we see Jesus says, "Nevertheless, I have a few things against you, because you allow that woman, Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols." In verse 22, it says, "Indeed, I will cast her into a sickbed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation." So here we are in Revelation chapter 17 now. We are in the Great Tribulation here in Revelation 17, and we see this church that is still around. Now, Thyatira was clearly cast into the Great Tribulation because they seem to still be a part of false Christendom. And so it seems that they will not repent. It seems that they will not change their mind, and that is something to be sensitive to. Moving on, Revelation chapter 17, verse 6. In Revelation 17, verse 6, it says, "I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." Hey, thanks, Nandio. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It says, "I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." This blood of martyrs, what's interesting about the word martyr is that that's where we get the word witness from. A witness. You know, when we think of the word witness, what we think of is it's 100% the Vatican. Yeah, no, a lot of people think that this woman arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned, I think, this could be a great picture of the Vatican. There's a great argument to be made for that. Because, the Roman Catholic Church, which is a picture of Thyatira, which is what we just were reading about, seems to go hand in hand with this church that we're reading about right now, which is why we went back to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2, the church in Thyatira means a continual sacrifice. And so when you compare that to the Roman Catholic Church, what they still do today is they, we talked about it during the recap, but transubstantiation, where they, consume the bread and the grape juice or whatever, and they think that it literally turns into the body and the blood and whatnot. That's wrong. Infant baptizing, they do, the rosaries, they do confessionals to priests. They do all of these things, and it's so ritual traditions, and it's works-based rather than faith-based. And so that is very interesting to just see the connections there. But in Revelation chapter 17, verse 7, it says, Revelation 17, verse 7, it says, "But the angel said to me, why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is." What's interesting about verse 8, where it says the beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition, it says that those who dwell on the earth are going to actually see this guy. And so that's something that we, I believe we're going to be gone before the Antichrist is actually revealed. But verse 9 is where we're going to spend some time here. Because it's at the end of verse 8, it says the beast that was and is not and yet is. The beast that was and is not and yet is. What is going on here? In verse 9, it says, "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the mountain sits." So what's interesting about, or what's good to recognize, is that we're talking about 7. We're talking about 7. We're talking about 7 kings. We're talking about 10 kings. We're talking about 7 kings and 10 kings. What's important to understand is that the 7 kings are different than the 10 kings. So look in verse 10, Revelation 17, verse 10. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 10, it says, "There are also 7 kings." Those are 7 kings. Now go to verse 12, Revelation 17, verse 12. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 12, it says, "The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings." So you have 10 kings and 7 kings. What's important to understand is that they are different. They're not the same. The 7 kings are different from the 10 kings because the 7 kings happen chronologically. The seven kings represent seven mountains, and the seven mountains are those empires that we talked about before: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, the Persian Empire, Greek, Rome 1, and Rome 2. Those are the seven kings and kingdoms. But the 10 kings in Revelation chapter 17, verse 12, those 10 kings all happen all at the same time. They are all, they see each other. They're all talking with one another. They're all in the same room with one another. So the 7 kings are one at a time. There's one, and then he's ruling, and then he falls down, and then another one rises up, and then he falls down, and then another one rises up, and then he falls down. But the 10 kings, they're all around each other at the same time. They're buddies. They know each other. They call each other up. So it's important to understand that there's the difference between the 7 kings and the 10 kings. But let's stay here in verse 10, and let's talk about verse 10, because verse 10 is difficult. In Revelation 17, verse 10, it says, "There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time." So what is he talking about here? So here, these 7 kings, what we talked about before, it's a picture of kingdoms because of the mountains that were in the previous verse. So in order to have a king, there needs to be a kingdom, which is where the mountains come into play. The 7 heads are 7 mountains or kingdoms. So you have 7 kingdoms in verse 10. He says 5 of the kingdoms have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. So from the time when John was writing this down, it says 5 of the kingdoms have fallen in Revelation 17, verse 10. 5 of the kingdoms have fallen. What were the kingdoms that had fallen when John was writing this down? Well, Egypt was fallen. Assyria was fallen. Babylon was fallen. The Persian Empire was fallen, and the Greek Empire was fallen. He continues on. He says 1 is. Well, what was the one kingdom that is during John's time? The Roman Empire. So 5 fallen, 1 is, and then he says, and the other has not yet come. The other kingdom has not yet come. That's Rome 2. That is the revived Roman Empire. So he's saying, so this angel, he's like, "What are you talking about, John?" He's like, "John, I'm going to tell you the mystery. I'm going to show you what's all this is all about." He's like, there were 5 kingdoms. 5 of the kingdoms, they're fallen. So they're gone. 1 kingdom is John. I want you to imagine like you're the angel talking to John, because if I told you that if you went back then, you would understand, hey, that kingdom that is right now, that's Rome. That's a Roman Empire, because John was alive during the Roman Empire. So that's the one that is. Then he says, and the other has not yet come. And so that is the one that you and I are still awaiting for. That's the revived Roman Empire that is going to enter the scene sometime in the future. I believe during my lifetime. That's just an opinion, though. In verse 10, he continues and he says, "And when he comes, he must continue a short time." So the king of this revived Roman Empire kingdom, the king of that kingdom is going to continue for a short amount of time. The king of that kingdom is going to be the Antichrist. He's going to take the reins. He's going to be like, "I'm in charge now." He's like, "You're going to worship me. I am God. You're going to follow everything I say and do and worship me as such." So then you get to Revelation. Hey, thank you, December. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 11, here's another weird verse. Revelation 17, verse 11, it says, "The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition." Now, what is he talking about here? He says the beast that was and is not is himself is also the 8th and is also of the 7. What is he talking about? Let's go back to Daniel real fast. Daniel chapter 7. If you go to Daniel chapter 7, it's really difficult to, this hurts your mind talking about this kind of stuff. So hopefully it's kind of connecting some kind of dots. But in order to understand where it says he is of the 8th, but he is of the 7, but he's the 8th, but he's of the 7. What is that talking about? Go to Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. Hey, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that, Rose. In Daniel chapter 7, thank you for writing those down, Bridget. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, it says, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. In verse 8, it says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. So you see that there were 10 kings. Thank you, Maria. There were 10 kings, and you see that there were 3 that were plucked up. So if you remove 3 from 10, you're left with 7. And then you add that little horn, and that is what that's what Revelation chapter 17 is talking about. Revelation chapter 17, verse 11, where it says, the beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7. So when you go back to Daniel chapter 7, you see 10 kings. You see 3 of them are removed or ended. The Antichrist is going to end them. He's going to end them. There are going to be 7 left. And then he's going to be the 8th. So he is the 8th, but he's of the 7. So that is what Revelation 17, verse 11 is talking about. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7 and is going to perdition. He's calling the shots right now. He's telling you where this guy is going to end up eventually. And so that's just good news for everybody. But that's what Revelation 17, verse 11 is talking about. Okay, Revelation chapter 17, verse 12. Moving on, Revelation chapter 17, verse 12, it says, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they received authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So here you have the 10 kings entering the scene. But here, these 10 kings are going to be brought back down to 7. So these 10 kings are not, they're going to be, he's letting you know, it's still playing off of what Daniel 7 is talking about. The 10 kings are the 10 horns. They're going to be 7, or 3 of them are going to be removed. So you're going to be down to 7 of them. But they have no authority as of yet. It's interesting because we try to do the best that we can, trying to figure out, hey, is it the BRICS nations? BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, all that kind of stuff. We try to do the best that we can, trying to be like, oh, is this it? Is this it? The BRICS nations, in my opinion, are not it. I made a video when the BRICS came out, and I was like, they're not even in the right area for the revived Roman Empire to be, because they're in different parts of the world. And so in order for it to be a part of the revived Roman Empire, they would need to be geographically speaking, in a certain part of the woods, but they were, all over the place. And so I just made the argument that it's probably not them based upon where they were located in the world. It didn't fit, at least in my opinion. But that's just my 2 cents. Anyways, Revelation chapter 17, verse 13. Revelation chapter 17, verse 13. Hello, Leah. In Revelation 17, verse 13, it says, these are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. So basically what they're saying here in Revelation 17, 13, John is being told that these 10 kings, they're going to be 10 kings, and then when they see that three of their buddies were eliminated, they're going to be like, oh, snap. And then they're just going to be like, okay, you can have all of my authority. And they're going to give their power to the beast willingly. They'll be like, we are falling in line with the with whoever the man of sin is going to be. They're going to fall in line and total line type of situation here. All right, Revelation chapter 17, verse 14. Revelation 17, verse 14 says, these will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. I love how we are told here that it's the Lamb. I think that's very interesting because it's the Lamb. The Lamb is going to overcome. It doesn't talk about Jesus. It doesn't refer to him as a lion here. In Revelation chapter 5, it talks about how the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. You got these very, the lion is a very fierce creature. But here you see the Lamb. And it's interesting because in Matthew chapter 3, you have John the Baptist, John chapter 1. In John chapter 1, you have John the Baptist. Well, it's both chapters, I suppose. But you have John the Baptist out there baptizing people. And then he sees Jesus, start walking over the hill or whatever. And he sees Jesus. And right when he sees Jesus, he says, behold the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world. Now, that's a very Jewish type of phrase, because whenever you think of a lamb, if you were a Jew, you would think of Passover. And that's what they would do, the Passover lamb. And so that's the way that John was using it. But it's a very sacrificial kind of way to view it in a Jewish type of mindset. But here we are told that the lamb is going to overcome this the beast and the kings and whatnot. It's just so interesting. It just almost like goes to show you like how little effort. Like he's like, I don't even need to flex. Like I don't even need to even. He's like, I'm letting you know, the lamb. Like I'll beat you as a lamb. Like it's just interesting. I just love how like the lamb. It's so good. Moving on to verse 15, it says, then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So the false church is, the false church has great power and this crazy stranglehold on people and this mass influence on the entire world. And that's basically what is being pictured here as this great harlot sitting on top of all of these people. The great harlot is on top of everybody. It's basically got like their claws in all these peoples, and people don't even know it, which is what's so interesting when Jesus, in Matthew chapter 7, when, all these people are going to come up to Jesus and they're going to be like, Lord, didn't we do all these things? Didn't we do this? Didn't we do this? Didn't we do this? Didn't we cast out demons? Didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we do all these great signs? And then Jesus is going to be like, I never knew you. And so that's like a byproduct of the false church. There's a lot of religious people out there who do not know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and it's heartbreaking. But that is a byproduct of false Christendom, this false church. Hey, thank you, Whiskey Pay. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Revelation chapter 17, verse 16, it says, and the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So these 10 horns, this is what we talked about before. So during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, you have the religious system, which is the woman, the false church. Then at the same time, you have the 10 kings during the first 3.5 years. But then when they move into the second 3.5 years, the 10 kings become 7 kings. And the harlot becomes, she gone, because the kings are going to destroy her, because the Antichrist wants all the glory and power, and this, he only wants to be worshipped. And he can't be worshipped alone if there's a whole bunch of false churches all over the place. He's like, no, you guys are done. I am God. That's basically what he's going to be. And he's going to be very, very jealous about that. And he's going to cause everybody, if you don't worship me, he's going to end all of them. And so that's what's going on here. That's why in verse 16 it says, in the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, wherever the woman goes, the beast goes. This beast is going to turn and devour that woman, and then she is going to be gone. And then when she is gone, then the Antichrist will be like, okay, you worship me now. And so that's the idea. So for the first 3.5 years, you have the woman, false church, and you have the 10 kings. Then when they go into the second 3.5 years, you don't have the 10 kings anymore. You have the 7 kings, but they turn and they devour the woman, so that the man of sin, or the son of perdition, or the lawless one, can rise up and be worshipped. Okay, Revelation 17, verse 17. In Revelation 17, verse 17, it says, for God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now here in verse 18, Revelation 17, verse 18, the great city here he's talking, remember who's being talked to. John is the one who's being talked to. So the great city for John was Rome, but Rome to John was a picture of Babylon in the future. So it's very interesting. So the world empire to John, when John was boots on the ground, was Rome. And so that's what the great city was an allusion to, that Rome was the great city, but Rome was a type or a foreshadow of Babylon. There is going to be Babylon in some form rising up in the future. And that's what we're going to be talking about here in Revelation chapter 18.